But God, strong enough and exacting enough, can do this and leave you asking, why, God? Why did you forsake me? You ever feel like that? On that Good Friday, this is exactly what the disciples felt. Because everything that could go wrong went wrong. And then what was so bad about it was the week started really good. I mean, they were entering with Jesus, and all these people came out from the city, and they laid down the palm leaves, receiving the king. Everyone was singing Hosanna. And even the kids went to the temple and sang Hosanna to the Son of David in defiance to the powers. And the blind and lame, they came and they were healed in the temple itself. The air was thick with expectations, and these 12 apostles strutted inside like, this is my day. But it's like, what happened? Like a sunny afternoon, suddenly it's pitch black night, and you don't know when it all happened. It just changed. And then there's the Last Supper, and the prayer at Gethsemane, and the betrayal, and the kiss, and then the trial, and then the crucifixion, and just like that, hope murdered. They nailed Jesus, their teacher, rabbi, on the cross, naked, like a filthy animal. And of course, that was the whole point of the crucifixion. Look, he ain't human. No worth to our society. How can something so good go so bad in a matter of days, hours? You ever feel like that? So the only question you left with, why, God? You get a call, there was an accident. The doctor calls you in. Sit down, we have to have a talk. You get a text, and it's a breakup text. Through a text? You ever feel like that? Why? You feel like, okay, you're clean, you've overcome the addictions, and you're good to go now, and then suddenly you get laid off a job, and then before you know it, you're right back to that addiction. That one puff, that one drink, that one look. And you feel worse than when you first started trying to overcome it, because now you feel that you've betrayed your own self. You can't even trust yourself. You feel guiltier than before. Why? I was trying, God. You ever feel like that? You want to start over, but you can't. John, chapter 20, verse 1. Early on the first day of the week, while it was still dark, Mary Magdalene went to the tomb and saw that the stone had been removed from the entrance. So she came running to Simon Peter and the other disciples, the one Jesus loved, and said, "They have taken the Lord out of the tomb, and we don't know where they have put him." So Peter and the other disciple started for the tomb. Both were running, but the other disciple outran Peter and reached the tomb first. He bent over and looked in at the strips of linen lying there, but did not go in. Then Simon Peter came along behind him and went straight into the tomb. He saw the strips of linen lying there, as well as the cloth that had been wrapped around Jesus' head. The cloth was still lying in its place, separate from the linen. Finally, the other disciples who had reached the tomb first also went inside. He saw and believed that it was stolen. They still did not understand from Scripture that Jesus had to rise from the dead. Then the disciples went back to where they were staying, shuddering in fear and abasement. Is it possible that a new day could dawn for me? As the one poem says, the new day cancels the dread. Dawn forgives all sins. All the judgments of insomnia, it is as if they were just dreams. So if the sun rises, if a new day comes, if I could just wait for the morning, then all our mornings will be swept away, surely. But what happens when the sun rises and it's not the new day, but just the next day? The next day. And the next. So if Mary stood up and the world was still dark, and even though the sun came up and guided her path to the tomb, it was still a dark world, because her teacher, The one who rescued her died, and the whole world was dead. She went to the garden, and even the smell of lilies and chrysanthemums, it stank of death. And as she went, she thought it can't get worse than this. But it did. She goes to the tomb. The only thing she can do is put spices. She can't deny death. She can't even slow it down. She could at least cover the smell of death temporarily. But even that she cannot do, because when she goes, the tomb is empty. Somebody has stolen the body of Jesus. Someone who hated Jesus even beyond life. They weren't just satisfied with him dying. They thought that this Jesus, who was less than a slave, didn't deserve to be buried in a virgin tomb and have a marker. No, he should be thrown in the massive grave with the nameless people. There should not even be a sign that he lived on this earth. The body was stolen. It got worse than she ever imagined. The new day, just the next day, and the next, and the next. Is it possible? James Moon was an Iraq War veteran. And he went to war and came back alive, but damaged. Right? Post-traumatic stress syndrome, PTSD. And so everything would remind him of war. And the only time he felt alive was when he would risk his life. And before the war, he was a country singer, and he wrote country songs. But after war, he just couldn't write any more songs. And so I want to share with you this clip from James Moon. It's a country song. A New Yorker is going to use, hold on. Okay, I think you messed up my joke line here. A New Yorker is going to share with you a country song, which shows you I've been totally assimilated. Now you can play.
Used to write a lot of songs where I put my hopes and fears. Hadn't finished a new song, going on 5 long years. This war got the best of me, and so I put down my pen, trying to write a new song. Where do I begin?
So his only type of new song, actually 5 years, is about how he cannot write a new song. Is there a genuinely new song? Is there a genuinely new day for us? John chapter 20, verse 11. Now Mary stood outside the tomb, crying as she wept. She bent over to look into the tomb and saw 2 angels in white seated where Jesus' body had been, one at the head and the other at the foot. They asked the woman, "Why are you crying?" "They have taken away my Lord," she said, "and I don't know where they have put him." At this, she turned around and saw Jesus standing there, but she did not realize that it was Jesus. He asked the woman, "Why are you crying? Who is it you are looking for?" Thinking he was the gardener, she said, "Sir, if you have carried him away, tell me where you have put him, and I will get him." Jesus said to her, "Mary." She turned toward him and cried out in Aramaic, "Rabboni." Jesus said, "Do not hold on to me, for I have not yet ascended to the Father. Go instead to my brothers and tell them, I am ascending to my Father and your Father, to my God and your God." Mary Magdalene went to the disciples with the news, "I have seen the Lord." And she told them that he had said these things to her. On the evening of the first day of the week, when the disciples were together with the doors locked for fear of Jewish leaders, Jesus came and stood among them and said, "Peace be with you." After he said this, he showed them his hands and side. The disciples were overjoyed when they saw the Lord. Again, Jesus said, "Peace be with you. As the Father has sent me, I am sending you." And with that, he breathed on them. Receive the Holy Spirit. If you forgive anyone's sins, their sins are forgiven. If you do not forgive them, they are not forgiven. For Mary, it started as the next day. See, it wasn't a new day because the sun was shining bright. It only became a new day when she met Jesus, risen from the dead. See, until then, she was on the ground, wet with her own tears. The new day did not bring anything, hope, life, nothing for her. It was only when she met Jesus risen from the dead. This, I want to be very clear. The only way that we could have a new day is if Jesus defeated death and did rise from the dead. It was not for Mary a good sleep and a good sunrise that did it for her. And it will not do it for us. The sunrise only brings the same old day. As the Ecclesiastes writers say, there's nothing new under the sun. See, resurrection is not talking about, well, tomorrow will be a better day. Tomorrow will be different. The sun will come out tomorrow. No. The resurrection is not tomorrow is not today, so it's going to be okay. The resurrection is not even spring. It's not any personification or practice or liturgical practice of the renewing season of spring. It's not that at all. It's about a very specific historical event when something drastically new that has never happened in this world happened. The unexpected, the unexplainable happened. Jesus, a man, rose from the dead. W.S. Di Pietro, an essayist and a poet, and he's definitely by no means a Sunday-going evangelical. He writes this in an essay on a poetry magazine, which is the oldest poetry magazine in the U.S. That is the title, Poetry. And he wrote this. He says, Easter still matters, but not as a recurring emergence of energy without any connection to the historical intervention of Jesus. That is shriveled and puny. Did you get that? What are you saying? If you think Easter is just about celebrating the spring, it's about the flowers are back and the pollens are back, right? If you think that's going to be renewing, no. Especially us NC people, you know what spring comes, right? With those green sleets of pollens that cake your car in the mornings, warm breezes and allergies. You want to pin your hope on a season? Like winter doesn't last, spring comes, but spring doesn't last either. It's only 3 months. So only 3 months of the year you have hope, and every other season is like, gotta wait for the next 3 months. You want to pin your hope on the sunrise? What if it rains like it did today? Resurrection is not the remembrance or the practice or the celebration of the return of spring or sunrises. It is a claim that 2,000 years ago, Jesus rose from the dead. Now that's unbelievable. You're right. Do you believe it really? Right? Nobody claims that before Jesus. Is it possible? Actually, the disciples thought the same thing. Disciples thought, no, this is unbelievable. And then they came to believe. That's why it's true. That's why it's true. You see, the people who detract, right, about the resurrection, people say, did it happen? There's several arguments. One of the arguments is, it's mass hallucination. But mass hallucination needs people to believe that it's going to happen, want it to happen. But you see, disciples, they didn't want it to happen because it didn't even cross their mind. They didn't expect this at all. It was so unexpected that when they are retelling the story, they keep telling the people that, hey, we really didn't expect it. We were dumb. Like they were willing to tell everybody how dumb they were. You look at all gospel accounts, right? They never get it. They never get it. Even when they see Jesus, like even in John, they see it and they're like, no, it can't be. And that's why when Peter and John see the tomb, they were like, oh my goodness, the body is stolen. They run back into their tomb, which was hiding in the basement. When Mary sees Jesus, she doesn't recognize him. Why? Because the thought never crossed her mind. She was like, obviously, you are the gardener. What did you do with my Jesus' body? The disciples started with doubt. And it was only as Jesus came to them over and over again, they finally came to know. You know what that process looks like? It looks like truth. Hallucination is, I wanted to see it. I want it to happen. It happens. And then reality hits and says, that was just hallucination. From confidence to doubt. Truth is from doubt to confidence. And then some people say, well, you know what? See, these guys, they invested so much in Jesus' movement, and like, wow, they can just end up like this, so they had to make up the story. And so you are saying to me that they made up the story, and they went around and said, the most unbelievable story you can find. Oh yeah, hey, this guy, he rose from the dead. And then they said, you better show up, it doesn't make sense, or we're going to kill you. Okay. So you are saying that they make up a story so they don't feel like a failure, and then they die for it. And then we say, oh, well, religious fanatics, they do that all the time. Jihadists, they all die. No, it's different. These jihadists, they go to kill their enemies and die in the process because they hate their life. They were cowering in fear. They didn't want to die. They even ran away when Jesus was betrayed. They don't want to die. But then once they meet this Jesus, and it's the truth, gosh, how can you lie? How can you live with yourself if you deny the truth? And say, I can't back away from this claim. This is what I saw. This is the truth. You're going to die. So let me die. They don't go blowing themselves up, killing their enemies, but actually, for the sake of their enemies, they're willing to die. Because it's truth. Man, they can't deny it as much as they can deny their own existence. It's the truth. And when you really think about it, see, all these people who argue against resurrection, it's a very ahistorical view. They don't consider the historical context of it. And just think about this too. If you want to start a religious movement, you really don't need anyone to resurrect. You don't need your founder to resurrect. In fact, all religions start with dead founders. They all have dead founders. And they do pretty well. Even the old religion, Judaism, right? Judaism, that founder, Moses, starts a nation, starts a religion, which is really one and the same. And this book in the Torah says they couldn't find the body. But out of that, they don't go and claim that Moses was resurrected. They say Moses went to be with the Lord. And the dead Moses founded this religion, and they're strong. You don't need a resurrected person for a religious movement. Islam, one of the fastest growing religion, probably outpacing Christianity, they're proud that their founder is dead. They look at Christians and say, man, you guys, you lost it. Like your founder resurrect, our founder, he's dead. And we like him dead. Right? It's more real. You don't have to have your founder to resurrect. A recent example, if you look at any of the news clippings lately, Associated Press has this about about Hugo Chavez, right? Died recently. And now there's this apotheosis, this divinization of him that's happening. Okay, now, the point here is not whether Chavez is good or bad. Okay, we see it through the Western media, which is very biased too. But I'm just simply saying that for Chavez, for the people who loved and respect him, now there's this kind of natural divinization. Right? And so one seamstress, it was in an article, was interviewed. She took the Holy Bible, and for the Holy Week, you know where she went to? She went to the tomb of Chavez. And there she cried her tears. And she said, in quote, oh, he saved us from politicians before. He saved us from everything. You go to Caracas, and you go get a poster. In the poster, you have Chavez. On the right hand, he has a golden cross, and he says, comrades, do not be afraid, do not be dismayed, for I am with you. Quote from Joshua, Lord thy God, replaced with I. But the point is this, but he's dead and they're okay with that. They don't need him to resurrect. In fact, dead founders are better than resurrected founders. You know why? Because with dead founders, you can remake him to be whatever ideals your group wants to propound. You don't need resurrection to try to start a religious movement. But here are these 12, and they say, oh, he's resurrected. What? What a stupid idea. But the thing is, it happened. It was true for them. And that's why they claimed what everybody thought was just dumb, if you want to start a religious movement, which also led them to their death. Sanders, a historian in Jesus and Judaism, he says this, that they had a resurrection experience, that's historically certain. What happened, I cannot say. Now, what he's saying is this, you just can't say that, oh, hallucination, they made it. No, They had a genuine religious experience. Not just an individual, but this whole group. Now, can I explain it scientifically? No. Just being honest. Yeah, of course, resurrection cannot be explained scientifically. Because if it could be explained scientifically, then it's just a natural event with factors that we did not know until our knowledge increased. With resurrection, okay, being very honest here, we're claiming something supernatural, miracle of all miracles, right? The mother of all miracles happened. I cannot explain it. Science will never be able to explain it, but you can accept it with confidence because historically it's true. And there are consequences, ramifications that points to it. Now we're like, well, I don't know about that. Is that a way to accept it? Did you know that science itself, even science itself, as it goes on trying to explain everything, there's one thing science cannot explain, and you must accept by faith if you are to do any science. And especially nowadays. It's those first principles, those fundamental things, that there is. And then, of course, the modern explanation for that there is the Big Bang. Think about the Big Bang theory. Right? It's ridiculous. It's like, see this Earth and then the solar system, and the solar system is part of this galaxy which has 600 billion stars, and then this galaxy is part of 600 billion galaxies. All of this, you know how it started? It's a one hot singular point. In fact, you can never say it's small because space didn't exist before it, and it bang, and then expanded and became this universe. Do you believe that? Because scientists say it is true, right? Do you know, even to 1960s, people said, nah, right? State solid theory, that makes more sense. But as they looked at it more and more, they realized that the only way that this current universe can be explained is by the Big Bang. The way the velocity of the way the space expanding, it's how uniform it is. Even what they call the cosmic microwave background. Okay, now I'm not pretending that I know all this, okay? But I read it, and basically there's this like low-level radiation. And actually, a long time ago, when we had TVs with antennas, anybody remember those days? Okay, back in those days, about 100 years ago, right? You would pick up some white snow sometimes. That was a cosmic microwave background radiation. Those were all small signs of what happened in the Big Bang. Now, here's the thing. Now, this is a quote, right? In Big Bang, it cannot and does not explain the moment of conception, the very beginning. It can't. But it does describe and explain the general evolution from that point forward. See, to a certain point, the science could go back. You can't replicate Big Bang. You can't like, okay, let's try to reproduce Big Bang. Science, right? Experiment, reproduce. Let's try it. You can't do that. But they could look at all the phenomena and try to understand it within the Big Bang, and then they could go back in time and think about how somehow this amazing heat, again, immeasurable, begins to spread, and as it begins to spread, it becomes atoms, and atoms become elements. But there's a certain point, science just cannot go back. You cannot explain it, describe it, prove it. You have to simply accept it. Because once you accept that it was Big Bang, oh, the universe begins to make sense. And that's what we're claiming with resurrection. There are historical reasons why it's very clear that it happened. Like I proved, this movement of Christianity, things just positing an idea that they never even thought of. Something happened. It also explains our human existence, why we are afraid of death. Death is irrational fear, Einstein says. But we fear, you know what? Because for us, there's a sense, the fear of death is the other side of the sense of that there must be more to life than this. Isn't it? And the resurrection explains that. This life, the meaning of this life, what death is. And our hope, and our sense that there must be something more. And so in one sense, it's a good analogy. It's not a perfect analogy. And what it's saying is that, look, just like the Big Bang, you cannot prove it, but a lot of life is explained by it, so is resurrection. And like Big Bang, it's just a singular event. It's just one event, but that event continues to have universal ramifications. We live in that reality. And what we're saying is resurrection, singular event, one man, Jesus, rose from the dead, and now that has universal implications. And whether you know it or not, whether you accept it or not, we live in that reality. Reality where Jesus rose from the dead. And because Jesus rose from the dead, and then when we live with that truth and reality, then man, it is a new day. And so these disciples who are cowering in fear, so they meet Jesus, they step out of the shadows of the basement, they go up to sunlight, they go into the temple as if they own their place, and those are the same leaders, those same religious leaders who killed their rabbi, the same religious who threatened them with death. He goes up to their face, well maybe not to their face, and says, he rose, he's alive. And they say, you better shut up, and they whip him, they try him, and they even kill James, but they're like, it's okay. They celebrate, they praise, they don't go back to their basement. They are bolder. They go out to the public and say, Jesus is alive. Because it happened. It's the truth. Leslie Newbigin, who was an atheist, who became a Christian, went to India, became a missionary, and he would tell about how, as he was a bishop and a missionary there, great thinker. I think ahead of his times, people would visit him, and they would come and lunch with him, and they would all invariably ask the same question. In your opinion, right, are you optimistic or pessimistic about the future Church of India? And he would answer, Jesus rose from the dead. That question does not rise. See, with the fact, there's no being optimistic or pessimistic. With fact, there's only believing or not believing. And when I read that, I was like, wow, that's like Yoda-like answer, right? So profound, it must be true. And then when you scratch your head and you start thinking about it, like, what? Did he really ask the question? It's like someone asking you, what's your favorite fruit? And you say, the Earth is the third planet in our solar system. It's like, what? Right? And then you start thinking about it. Of course, it makes sense. Because it doesn't matter what I think about the future. Oh, I'm optimistic about the church, so I'm going to do this. I'm pessimistic about the church, so I'm going to leave right now. No. Jesus rose from the dead. That's a whole new world. The kingdom of God is here, and it will continue to expand. And God will one day consummate everything. And so for me, I'm just part of that. You know, how I see it, what I feel, oh no. I'm just part of it. So I just simply need to do my part. Be faithful to my calling. And like, oh, that is definitely more profound than your answer. It's true. Jesus rose from the dead. That's a fact. And before it, there's no optimistic, pessimistic, what I feel. No. Do you believe it? That's the question. Friends, a new day has dawned. Actually, the first day of new creation has dawned. And this is why in our gospel, Jesus breathes. And then everybody's mind, of course, remember how God creates human beings? He breathes and Adam is alive. And so just like that, Jesus breathes, the resurrected Jesus, and says, this is the first day of new creation. And it has started. And we live in that reality. So whatever things that you came with, whatever burden you came with, whatever sufferings, whatever doubts, whatever sins, whatever guilt, it's a new day. Let it go. Let it go. Now, when you go back, of course, same thing might wait for you. The same situations, the same temptations, and all that. Friends, that will not define you. You are not the same. You are a new creation. Because Jesus rose from the dead. And we live in that reality. So I'm not asking for your opinion on this. I'm asking, do you believe it? Let's pray.